Hello, Internet. Gino, that Pinguino Greco here again with another episode of Deep Listens. This time we are going to be talking about Oddworld Stranger's Wrath, and I'm joined, as always, by Billy, the Grinch of Games, Rothert.
I forget why you called me that. Was it from her story?
You called yourself that, and I said, I'm going to call you that too.
I think the phrase I might have used was, I don't want to call myself the Grinch of Games, but maybe I have
so we
to.
did it for you. Yeah.
Thanks,
that's
guys.
That's a great nickname.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Billy Rothard, a.k.a. Rothgar. Happy to be back. I picked Oddworld Stranger's Wrath last time, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
Great preface to this conversation. We also have Peter, work hard, play hard, Busby.
It's the only way I know how to live, baby. How's it going, everybody? Fun animal fact for today's podcast.
Yes.
Do you know, well, this is a fun animal and Johnny Cash fact. So Johnny Cash, he struggled with drug addiction in his life, but one time he relapsed after he had to take pain pills after being attacked by an ostrich. It nearly killed him. It kicked him, broke 3 of his ribs, cut his stomach all up. He was only saved by the heft of his belt buckle.
What was he doing with the ostrich?
He had like an exotic animal farm or something. Like a standard Johnny Cash kind of move.
Oh, that's pretty amazing. So it was basically like a Mike Tyson tiger situation, but it
with
went
an
all
ostrich.
the way savage, but with an ostrich.
The most savage of the giant birds.
I didn't realize that his dark middle chapter was precipitated by an ostrich.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. And we are also joined by a special guest, our first international guest, if you couldn't tell by his accent, Dan Kempster. Hello.
I haven't heard his accent yet.
Hey, thanks very much for having me on.
You might know him from GiantBomb.com. He has an excellent blog that you should definitely check out. But I reached out to him because he happened to actually write a blog on Oddworld Stranger's Wrath not a few days before we were recording, and I was like, this is really smart. I should get someone who's smart, who knows about these games better than me, to talk on this podcast.
I'm not sure I'll go that far.
That'll just be our format. We'll bring on experts and just let them talk for us.
Oh, that would be so much better. It'd be so much easier. I wouldn't have to come up with notes, just questions. What is this game?
I'd still have to edit the same, though, so it really wouldn't help me out.
That's fine. Fair enough. So before we go into Oddworld Stranger's Wrath, as always, we have our comments, which if we have comments, I can read them here. And we do have some comments this week.
Yay!
Of all the comments that I
what
wanted,
are they about, Gino?
was not these.
They're about the hit video game that is sweeping the nation, Final Fantasy VIII.
Boo.
God.
That's too low. The Roman numeral should be higher than that.
That's true. We had a podcast, a very special podcast, where I talked to a lunatic about Final Fantasy VIII for 3 hours. And we got some comments. One, by someone who goes by Matt. He says, I want to play Triple Triad again, just not the Final Fantasy VIII part, though I did like it a lot when it came out. Triple Triad, really awesome minigame in that game. That's awesome. You should play it. I kind of agree. You might not want to play all of Final Fantasy VIII to play it, but thank you for that. And we also have a comment from someone who goes by Zombie Pie.
Okay.
And he says, I know that this is late and no one will ever read this, but I regret everything, but I also regret nothing. So, clearly, it wasn't too late.
Some existential dread that Final Fantasy VIII engenders, it seems like.
Yes. Some existential dread, and then a little bit of like, there's some good parts, but So, if you want to reach out to the podcast and maybe
play
give
Final
us...
Fantasy VIII first, and then send us a message.
That's accurate. But you can go ahead and tweet at DeepListensPod. We also have on deeplistens.libsyn.com. You can hit our comments up for specific podcasts there, or you can send an email at deeplistenspodcast or deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. So, without further ado, Stranger's Wrath. So, Dan, you've played some of the other Oddworld games. Could you just give us an idea of where Stranger's Wrath fits within the overall Oddworld pantheon?
I will do my very best. So, Oddworld Stranger's Wrath is, even by Oddworld standards, it's very much a black sheep. The first 2 games came out on the PS1 in the late 90s. They were 2D puzzle platformers. And then Munch's Odyssey was the third game. That was a 3D puzzle platformer, so it's the same kind of mechanics but moved into a 3D space. That originally came out on the original Xbox in 2001, I believe. But mechanically, Stranger's Wrath is a completely different beast. Obviously, it's part third-person action game, part first-person shooter. So a major departure there from what Oddworld inhabitants were used to doing.
Did the environment and stuff, like the aesthetics of the Oddworld games, carry over, or was it just entirely new mechanically and visually?
The Western stuff is completely new as far as the visual style of the series goes. And the games, as well as being both 2D and 3D, they had a shared aesthetic. That there was like this juxtaposition of like really vibrant natural environments with this really dirty, grimy industrial setup that was sort of encroaching on the natural environment. And you don't see too much of that to begin with in Stranger's Wrath. It does get there in the end, but that initial Western aesthetic is completely unique to that game.
Okay, so are the monsters that are present in Oddworld, do they carry over from game to game, or is it different kind of weird, strange creatures in each of those entries?
Stranger's Wrath is, again, much like the aesthetic style. The majority of the creatures that you see in Stranger's Wrath, I think, in fact, only the fuzzles, which are one of the ammunition types, they're the only things that carry over from a previous game. The other games deal heavily in, I believe, most of the creatures through Abe's Odyssey, Abe's Exodus, and Munch's Odyssey are consistent. So you've got the Mudokons, who are like a peace-loving neo-Paleolithic race. You've got the Gluckons, who are the industrial race. They're the ones who are encroaching on the natural habitat. And then you've got some other creatures that make up the ecosystem as well that are almost equivalent, but not quite equivalent to creatures that we have in our world. So you've got scrabs, which are a bit like giraffes if giraffes wanted to kill each other.
Great.
And paramites, which are part sheep, part spider.
So they have silk and wool.
Yeah.
All of your clothing needs, like they're the best tailor.
And they're never cold.
Is silk warm?
But wool is warm.
Yeah, wool.
They're both.
Yeah, you're warm and fashionable.
Okay.
You can have the best of both worlds.
Doesn't shrink in the wash. Go ahead.
But yeah, the vast majority of the creatures you see in Stranger's Wrath are completely unique to that game.
Okay. Wow. I did not anticipate. I didn't know that. I thought going in maybe the chicken people or Stranger or any of those characters maybe carried forward, because I knew that the humor. I knew of the fart button in is it Abe's Odyssey?
Yes. Yeah, I believe, I'm not certain about Munch's Odyssey, but I know Abe's Odyssey and Abe's Exodus both had a fart button.
There's a button that it just makes him fart. That's all it does.
Yep.
And does it have mechanical ramifications?
Not in Abe's Odyssey. In Abe's Exodus, they do give it mechanical ramifications. Once you reach a certain point in the game, you become able to possess your own farts and use them as explosives.
That is, I don't know if I like it better or worse if it doesn't actually do anything. But yeah, so I knew that existed, so I kind of anticipated a little bit of toilet humor out of Stranger's Wrath. So the tone I anticipated, but like the variety of the creatures, I didn't necessarily expect. And I guess early on in Stranger's Wrath, there isn't that much variety. You're dealing a lot with chicken people who all share the same ungodly voice.
I think it's one voice actor, just the same, just copy pasted over and over again.
They locked him in a room and they came back and they had dialogue, but for the whole game.
When I think about that little pipe dream of mine, like, I think it'd be really cool to be a voice actor someday. That's the job I don't want. We need to voice 65 different characters, but it's all the same. Just new script.
It's like, we're going to need this 120% more abrasive, too. Is there any way?
Can we just make you a little more annoying? It's okay. We can do some post-production stuff to make it sound really bad, but can you give us a good start?
Put that slider all the way up.
So what's my motivation on this one? You're a chicken man who's also a scientist? Okay.
Sure.
Let me see. Hello? Okay, that's good.
We're not gonna do voice impressions right now. Please, God. Okay, no.
Okay,
Let's
fair enough.
let's jump into Oddworld.
Yep. So Stranger's Wrath. At the start of the game, you play as someone who's known only as Stranger. You're a bounty hunter who uses like a crossbow with live ammunition to hunt down outlaws in different pun-named cities full of chickens.
Your motivation for this is revealed early in the game, that there's some kind of operation or surgery that Stranger needs, which he describes as, I need this to survive. So it seems like there's some kind of looming time constraint on you or something. You got to get 20,000 grand, or the currency in the game is called moolah. And you got to hunt outlaws and collect bounty and get 20,000 moolah to have this operation done. That's what your motivation is at the start. So,
yeah. And early on, the game plays... you basically go into a little hub world, a little town, 3 different chicken towns, each with their own particular outlaws, and you take bounties from the bounty store, where apparently...
That's where I get my bounties from,
Yeah, of course. You turn in criminals.
Why split it into 2 buildings, though? Like, there's a
mean?
jail and a bounty store. It'd be way more efficient to have it all in one place.
Job creation, Pete.
That's a good point. All right.
I'm also pretty sure that it was a constraint of like a 2005 era of game. That,
oh no, I get the program. I'm just concerned about the economics of the town.
All right, well, you can write a letter to
the Cluck
to like the Cluck representative of your district.
This is wasteful. We don't need 2 people to do this.
Taxpayer dollars.
All the pork in this bill.
I know where those bars come from. I know how much you're paying for them. Yeah, so you go to the bounty store, you collect a bounty. Usually there's maybe 1 to 3 different bounties you can pick at any given time. And then you go out, you take out outlaws, and one interesting mechanic that they have is captured alive versus captured dead. Every outlaw has a value to you alive or dead, and usually alive is worth 3 to 4 times as much as a dead outlaw.
I think there's no enemy in the game that is worth more dead.
No.
I think all enemies are worth more alive.
Yep. So it gives you an incentive to play around with these different ammo types that you get, because some deal damage, some manipulate
more
enemies'
like stun.
movements. Yeah, some are
or
stuns.
status effect.
Exactly. So
let's go over some of the ammo types.
Sure. Go ahead.
So the ones that stood out to me, and I guess I want to know which loadouts you guys used most frequently. What was your favorite 2 ammo combos? But the ones you get at the start of the game is your what's called zap flies, and they're just like you have an unlimited amount of them. That ammo never exhausts itself. It's your base ammo. It has the ability to, when it's not fired, charge up an electric shock that can be used to stun enemies.
It is a combination taser and like 8-shot machine gun. And if it charges, it tases and does a lot of stun damage. And if you rapid fire it, it's just kind of bad. Don't do that.
Yeah. So that was the zap fly. There's fuzzles, which I think Dan mentioned were present in some other games, but had different role now. Yeah. They're sort of like a hybrid between like a landmine and just like a regular like bullet, like a medium round bullet. It does damage over time, and it can be used as a landmine. So it's got a really interesting effect. It can like stick to walls and stuff.
Yeah, fuzzles are these little rabid looking, because all the ammo except for zap flies in Stranger's Wrath, you need to actually physically hunt down to get more ammo. Fuzzles are kind of like little brown like balls with faces.
They honestly remind me of
they look like
Spirited
Furbies.
Away, Hayao Miyazaki, like little
the ash
balls.
Yeah.
That's what they really look like.
Just with teeth.
Mm-hmm.
But way madder.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're landmines, and when they bite dudes, it causes them to freak out. And
that's really good.
If they're near water, they'll sometimes jump in, and no enemies can swim. Swim classes are just nowhere to be found in the world of Oddworld. Is that
chickens
canon,
don't
Dan?
swim.
No one can swim?
It's partial canon. In Munch's Odyssey, Abe cannot swim, Munch can. So,
Okay, so it's a class thing. Got it.
yes, yeah.
Moving forward, we've got skunks, which are basically smoke bomb.
They're a skunk that causes people to vomit, and then you can capture them while
sick.
they're vomiting.
Chipmunks are the most annoying, mind-destroying ammo that I've ever used in a game.
Yeah, that's actually a fair point. Every ammo makes a sound or something while it's in your crossbow before you shoot it, and chipmunks just kind of talk yang at you the whole time. And that's... So, at a certain point, I was only ever equipping chipmunks right before I shot them, because I didn't want them staring at me talking.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, it was awful.
Terrible.
So basically, they make a lot of noise, and they lure enemies to a location. Bolamites are spiders that work like bolo. They wrap up an enemy, deal no damage. They wrap them up, makes them easy to catch. And those are sort of all the non-lethal ammunition. Your regular ammo, like the Zapfly, can do damage, but it's not really used for that.
Yeah, you'd have to shoot people a lot.
Your lethal or your damage-dealing ammo includes the Thud Slug, which is basically a miniature cannonball. It deals pretty good damage, but also lots of stun for enemies that are vulnerable to stun. Sting Bee are little hornets that just home in on people and deal very small amount of damage, but you have huge amounts of them, and they rapid fire super fast.
It's basically a machine gun.
Yeah. Bomb bats are rocket launcher or grenade launcher.
And they home a little bit.
They home a little bit. And then there was this one weird ammo type that was like sniper. Yeah, and it kind of doesn't fit into the rest of the mold.
Yeah, the darts. The darts are the only weapon that you don't find naturally occurring. You have to buy them or
find boxes of them
in other ways.
Yeah. And they don't really fit into the model of what weapons or what ammo is used, so we're probably not going to talk about them that much, but they were just basically one sniper round that you could use to instantly kill any non-boss enemy.
Yeah, and that was the only ammo in the game where zooming in was actually useful.
True.
You have to zoom in to shoot the sniper round.
So the loadout that I used most frequently was Thud Slug, Bolamite.
Okay. I didn't use the Thug Slug. My combo was pretty much Bolamite, Zapfly.
Yeah, Zapfly, Bolamite.
Dan?
Yeah, I leaned quite heavily on Zapflies and Bolamites for regular enemies, and then bosses I found I was switching to Thud Slugs and Zapflies. Yeah,
if you needed to take someone out stun-wise as a boss, you had to use Thud Slugs and Bolamites and Zapflies.
Yeah, I did that for bosses.
Not vulnerable to Bolamites for the most part. And that's something interesting where each boss is a unique, even though they all have the same voice, again, all the bosses and all the enemies come from, I guess, the same gigantic family, and you meet their mama.
Joe Mama.
Oh, Joe Mama. I have a question about that later. But,
stupid names.
Yes, but each of the bosses have different mechanics associated with them. Once you actually get to their final arena,
very cool boss fights.
Yeah, and some of the bosses will be completely invulnerable to certain attack types. Some of them will be hyper vulnerable to like one or two, and so it actually causes you to vary up your playstyle pretty differently depending on. It
forces you to.
Yep, like there was some boss where they had like a shield for a few seconds, and then they were surrounded by like turrets and stuff. And against that guy, I just couldn't. You couldn't run up on him because he was shooting missiles and stuff.
He was the junkyard guy. I forget his name. Pack Rat Palooka.
Yeah, he sucked. I hate him so much. So, what was your favorite boss of the bounties? Like, because I found that I guess before we get to bosses, just the moment-to-moment gameplay, because they vary up what types of enemies you're catching, who you're encountering, and what number of enemies you have to deal with at any given time. I found that I was using almost every type of ammo as a result.
Except for chipmunks.
What? You never use chipmunks?
No, I refuse to use them.
You're a conscientious objector to
chipmunks?
Yeah,
it's just like, I don't care if this is way harder. It doesn't make a difference. I'm not using them.
Yeah, I only ever used them when I needed to lure... You eventually ran into suicide bombers.
Yeah.
and with them, if they ever saw you, they lit themselves on fire, and then anything you did would cause them to explode. And the only way to catch them without freaking them out was to Bolemite them before they saw you, or like chip punk them and then
Bolemite them.
Bolemite them.
So favorite boss fight. I think mine was, and I don't remember the name of him.
These are actually two different questions.
All right.
Favorite pun. What was your favorite pun first?
Oh, man. Can we do boss first, and then we'll think about pun?
I don't know if favorite's the right
Fair
word.
enough. We can change up the order.
Okay. So I don't remember the boss's name, but he was the one that shouted like Omega Super Body Slam and just globally could
the wrestler
jump on you.
No, not elbows for you. Was that big boot?
Fatty McBoom Boom.
Fatty
Yes.
McBoom Boom, because he had the rocket launcher too.
Yes.
And I think he was my favorite boss fight because he was actually the one that I died to the most.
I hated Fatty McBoom Boom. I didn't have too much trouble with him.
He was the hardest one for me. I guess it was my play style. I had a really hard time with Fatty McBoom Boom.
If I had to guess your play style, let me see if I can figure it out. Did you try to bag everyone always for all of the money?
Yes.
Okay. Did this cause you to sometimes in certain fights get really frustrated because you couldn't catch everyone and then you hit reset?
I never hit reset for not capturing a little enemy.
Okay.
Sometimes, some of them you had to kill because there were enemies that you could not reach to capture them. Like an enemy that was on like a high ledge, there's no way for you to capture them alive because any way you could get them down from the ledge, they fall and die.
Yeah.
So thank God for that. Otherwise, I would have had to capture every single enemy alive.
Great. So, Pete, what was your favorite boss fight?
I liked Mealy. Let me make sure I'm pronouncing this correctly. Mealy McGraw was my
Mealy
first.
McGraw?
Yeah.
Which one was that?
That was the one where he's riding on the other dude's shoulders.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I like the different ranges at which it operated. You know? Different fight if you were in close or if you were long distance, and you had to take out Tiny.
That was in the farmhouse, right?
Yeah.
The Oopel farm.
Opals. Ophels?
Oopels. Oppel, right? Or PPLE.
Apples?
Whatever.
Apples?
It was like Apple,
but odd because it had to be.
There's an achievement if you kill that guy, like the farmhand or like the farm owner. If you just like assassinate him, just cold-blooded, you get like a sweet achievement. I need to go back and replay it so I can get that achievement.
Okay, you did not get it.
No.
Dan, what was your favorite boss fight?
I can't remember the name of the guy, but it's the boss fight that takes place in the graveyard.
I was going to say him too.
And
really good.
It's just the verticality of that fight, the fact that you're constantly dealing with. You've got waves of the regular enemies coming in, and then you have to take him out off his pedestal, bring him down to the ground to try and bounty him alive. I really appreciate that, and it really made me mix up my choice of ammo types as well.
Yeah,
that's the one you need to get the call for, like the animal call.
Yes, yeah.
Lefty Lugnuts.
Yep.
I think it was.
Yeah, that's him.
Yeah, I liked that one just because you had to juggle, not just dealing with the enemies that are on the ground, and then with him sniping at you. Because he was sniping at you, you needed to find these weird spots where you could actually stand without getting shot constantly.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I would use like chip punks or fuzzles to try and crowd control because anytime you stepped out from behind a rock, you needed to not be getting shot by 2 or 3 people. Otherwise, you would die.
You got really good at avoiding bullets in this game.
Yeah, I did like that the bullets didn't hit scan in this game. They were actually projectiles that you could see coming.
Yeah.
And then as you take damage, the way that you heal is Stranger just kind of shakes off the damage.
Physically, you shake it off. And sometimes if there's just like knives sticking in your body, they'll just pop right out onto the ground.
Yeah, it was... One time, I got shot by one of those little machine gun guys a whole bunch of times and then went into a cutscene. And Stranger's eye was just covered in darts.
Sorry, just shake it off.
I'm like, well, when this cutscene's over, I got to shake this off. But yeah, my favorite boss was Elbows Freely. I enjoyed his pun. Also, he was a mechanical boss. I really appreciated him having a different character model after dealing with so many bosses that just looked the same. Just a giant robot man who would punch you.
He's the one you had to shoot in the back.
Yeah, you had to shoot him in the back because no one put his back plate on. Because he was scratching. But you basically just you had to turn off like switches, or he tried to hit switches to make you fall down, and you had to shoot him in the back.
Yeah, you were safe up on top of these ledges, but he would push buttons to make the ledges release and you'd fall down. So you had to like blindly jump from side to side across these ledges and hit him in his weak spot. That was a pretty good fight. All the boss fights in this game were like very different. They made you do different things. They made you have timing. They made you have just straight up brute fighting. They made you be kind of stealthy at some points. A lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, some of them, definitely the, as much as I hated Packrat Palooka, Packrat Pete, that guy, I really appreciate, like, once I started getting that battle down, I appreciated how different it was to have, like, 20 missiles on screen at once, and I am dodging left to right, jumping. It felt almost like maybe Halo, like an actual first-person shooter, a real high-quality first-person shooter, because in that fight I had to be in first person at all times, because if I wasn't shooting, I was dying. And then there are some battles that really feel like platformers, and they managed to blend it in a way that I didn't expect. I thought that it was going to be a little bit like Jak and Daxter, like Jak 2, Jak 3, where the shooting is kind of secondary.
Mm-hmm.
Or it doesn't.
Or kind of Ratchet and Clanky, where the shooting is just more cartoony. They're just to be this is my method of damage dealing, and it's ridiculous, as opposed to this ammo type is required and very practical for this situation that I'm in. Whereas in a game like Ratchet and Clank, that's an amazing game and very fun. But the only thing that changes with your ammo type is how fast it shoots and how much it hurts.
Yeah. So what did you guys think of the Western atmosphere, like the Oddworld interpretation of the Wild Wild West? Because I didn't like the Cluckers. I didn't like their towns for the most part. I didn't enjoy, like, the Bounty Store. I thought that the first town, I enjoyed it the most, just because there was a jail, and you actually got a sense that it was kind of it was a border town, almost. You know, not very many buildings. You could understand why they were under constant outlaw attack. But then as you get into more and more developed towns, it seemed a little bit more outlandish. And I liked that the first town ends with an outlaw attack on the town itself. And that was unexpected.
Yeah, it did. I mean, say this for their use of the Western tradition. They hit all the major plot points. You know, sort of the stoic, not really anti-hero, but the stoic protagonist who sort of, it's pretty much the idea that he's always going to win. You know, the cowboy always comes through at the end. And, you know, the outlaws raiding the town, he comes in as a stranger. It's a very fistful of dollars type of setup, if anybody knows that Clint Eastwood movie.
Of course.
Of course. Yeah, totally.
Well, obviously.
Yeah, I don't know, because at first I kind of appreciated the Western thing, but the Cluckers were just so annoying, and Stranger's accent
is perfect.
And every time he spits to the side after he gets a bounty.
Is classy and holds true to the genre in which he is placed.
Really? How many?
I'm just doing great at finishing all your sentences today, right, Pete?
I don't remember Clint Eastwood or John Wayne spitting.
Gotta get to town to rent this bounty and get paid.
Yeah,
it's perfect.
I wasn't sure at a certain point if he just had a strong accent or a speech impediment. Because he would just constantly, he would break his sentences in weird spots.
From a rhetorical point of view, that's actually kind of profound. You know, making people, no, come on.
It gives the illusion of profundity. That doesn't make it.
Okay. You know, you got to give him some credit here. He's a weird Catman thing. And
he shouldn't be talking at all.
Yeah. He's doing his best.
Yes, if you look at it that way, that he shouldn't be talking at all.
I mean, it's just, It's an add-on, you know.
I liked everything about him. Honestly, like, I had problems with the Clucker people. Yeah, they were annoying. Every character was exactly the same, and that wasn't that great. But as far as Stranger goes, I liked almost everything about his character design. I actually liked the towns being so alive. You so frequently see NPCs in towns just walk around and they have no dialogue unless you talk to them. But there's like chatter in the town.
Yeah, but I didn't want it.
Maybe it got annoying after a while, but it was there, and a lot of games don't think to do that.
Yeah, the chatter is largely focused on whatever bounty you just took. All of a sudden, everyone's talking about this guy.
Think about how much writing had to go into that. All those Western bullshit puns.
Well, they only paid for one voice actor, so they could probably hire a lot of writers.
They had the budget.
I may be wrong on this count, so don't quote me here, but I believe the Clackers are actually voiced by Lorne Lanning, who's like the creator of Oddworld.
God, I believe that's the lead developer.
He's voiced a ton of the characters over the series, so, and I'm pretty sure that's his voice on those Clackers.
That's just how he talks in his daily life, like just straightforward.
It's a lonely, lonely life.
They didn't really do any. I don't know. This might be an unfair criticism because maybe they were just going for atmosphere. But the story's not. It's not really a commentary on the Western tradition or anything.
No,
like they were just like, all right, we need some sort of stoic protagonist that people are gonna look up to or something. Cowboys, all right.
Well, the thing that I appreciated about it was that you got a sense as soon as Stranger goes to Doc the first time and asks about his surgery, and he says you need 20,000 moolah in order to get the surgery done. All of a sudden, the Western environment made a lot more sense because he is just doing whatever he can for money. And it just so happened that in the world he was in, money comes from capturing folks. And so once I realized that I was trying to save up moolah, I started all of a sudden breaking barrels more and trying to find other ways to get sources of money because I thought maybe like the game would expect me to get 20,000 by the time I got to the end. And like once I got 20,000, the game was over. And I like really disliked the Cluckers and interacting with those people.
You can just take money from them.
Yeah.
You just run through the town, just mow them all to the ground. They don't die, but they'll just drop money. I never stooped to that level, but I appreciated that it was there in case I needed to.
Is there a downside for doing that?
No.
The downside to doing that is then having to listen to every single Clucker in the town insult you for hitting one of the townsfolk.
I actually get off, you stanky turd. In New York City, I actually because when he gets up to full speed, if you run into something, he'll just knock it aside and then money will come out. And if it's a citizen, money comes out of them and it treats them like you punch them or something on purpose. And so once I got to New York City, it's a pretty spread out spot. So I got up to a full run multiple times and hit multiple chickens by accident because controlling him when he's running is really difficult. And so hitting them, like I think the third one I hit, everyone said, bandits are attacking! Get out of here! And then they all ran into their homes and started cursing at me. So I think there is a drawback if you attack too many of them. Beyond
I think it's in the second town, Buzzardton. Right. I think if you take out 3 or 4 of the Clackers there, they actually turn the town guns on you. Everyone goes inside and they turn the town guns on you.
So we're operating under Zelda chicken rules.
Yeah, Legend of Zelda chickens.
You can attack one or two. But...
After that, they get revenge.
We should have known.
Really?
Of course. All video games obey the same chicken rules. It'd be pretty great if after the third or fourth one, just an actual chicken flew in from off screen and hit you.
That would be so expected.
What would the Cluckers think? Like, what is wrong with this townsperson?
What is even our topic right now?
I guess I wanted to mostly talk about how catching. So early on, there's this drive for 20,000 moolah.
Right.
And all of a sudden, like, you get this weird conflict because you have items that you can buy from the shop, but you're also ostensibly saving up for a surgery. And so for a while, I didn't buy anything from the shops. Do you guys do the same thing?
I was very selective.
I guess I just assumed that at some point the 20,000 moolah would be there. So I just bought whatever the hell I wanted.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I bought everything as it came up as well, and I was focused on bountying as many outlaws as possible for that specific purpose, so just to make sure I had enough disposable income to spend on those upgrades and stuff.
Yeah, I was thinking that maybe I could circumvent the game in some way by getting 20,000 early and then being able to finish, because I hated the first half of this game.
It just shuts off.
I was like, I've got the money, now I'll just double back to the first town and go to Doc's office, and then I get my surgery. But no, there's a big turn that we are purposefully, because the first half, we're trying to do this first episode, no spoilers, second episode, spoilers. So there's a big twist at some point, and I don't want to mention that.
And everything that I've ever seen or heard about this game, like all of the reviews that I saw, all of the G4 coverage from back in the late 2000s that made me even think of this game in the first place, only ever talked about part of the game that was before the big quote-unquote twist. There is a big twist, and everything I've ever seen or heard of this game never mentioned any of that stuff. Not a screen cap, not a ability preview, nothing.
And this raises sort of an interesting larger issue, is sort of how much leeway you're given with a structure like that. You know what I mean? Like, how much shit game can you have before the twist?
How much shit game?
Yeah, and people still bother to get to the twist.
That's a good question, because as I was playing Stranger's Wrath, at a certain point I looked up the Metacritic score, just on a lark. What would you think the Metacritic score is for Stranger's Wrath?
I think I actually know what the Metacritic score is.
Me too.
Oh, fine.
I mean, okay.
Dan, do you know the Metacritic?
I've got no idea. I'd guess low 70s, high 80s. High 70s, low 80s. Sorry.
It was 88,
Yep.
I think, out of
Yeah,
100.
it was
very high. And so when I read that, I'm like, what game are they playing? What were the standards for, like, puzzle, like, platformer, first-person shooter, was that just so revolutionary that they looked beyond the toilet humor, take it or leave it, that's not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the worst jokes in the world.
Yeah, Sunday Airplane was the worst joke we've ever seen, but...
You shut up. Sunday Airplane was pretty great. But I was just like, how could this have gotten this high of a score? Why are people singing the praises of the platforming? Because what did you guys think of the platforming?
I loved it. I thought it was organic and the controls were nice. You didn't like some of the first half of the game, but I enjoyed it a lot. Platformers were my number one genre of game growing up. And playing this, I think to myself, man, I wish some of the platformers were more like this. I did have a couple problems, though. Some of the level pathing made it so that a jump that you could so easily make, like all other platformers sort of curve or like make the edges of some of their platforms fuzzy, so if you're really, really close, you'll like scoot up it and stuff like that, and that's overlooked in a lot of games, but it happens a lot. Or some games will make that not a problem by having a ledge grab mechanic of some way. There was no ledge grab mechanic here, and all of the things that you could jump on were very hit or miss. So sometimes if you were just a little bit high enough, it would look like you were so high enough to reach it, and then you just fall to your death or fall way far behind in wherever you were going. That was the only problem that I had.
Yeah, something that I found was that the double jump in this game functioned very differently from most double jumps. That you have to commit.
There's like a window where your double jump is turned on, and then if you miss it, you can't double jump.
Yeah, it's really early, and I'm used to playing games like Jak and Daxter, where the double jump is whenever you want that second jump, that is when you get it.
Now, I will commentate on this a little bit, or comment, I guess is the word, but there is commentary to be had here where...
You just switched between three forms.
You know what? It's all right. Just let
it to a single
let that man live his life.
Just let it roll.
My commentation here would be...
I'll say something about
I'll make words come out of my face.
Words are going to happen. And think about is this a game designed for 16, 18, 20-year-olds? Not really. When this game came out, I think its target audience was like 10 to 15 or maybe even less, right? This is like a kid's game.
We're going to circle back around to that point in the
Sure. But I think about when I was a kid and I was good at video games and I was watching my friends try to also be good. They were pretty garbage at platformers. Like they would use their double jump way too early and waste the height of their first jump, by double jumping prematurely. That actually didn't happen in Stranger's Wrath because no matter when you used your double jump, you got the same carry, basically.
Yeah.
So that was nice. I like that they did that because that made kids that weren't platforming geniuses like I was in 1996,
Not to toot my own horn, but I was basically the Einstein of double jumps.
Do you see 12-year-old Billy in his basement with diagrams? If you get the 30% angle here and then you hit it right now.
I wasn't as into drop charts then, but it was coming up.
You're never gonna.
I hadn't quite hit drop chart puberty yet.
Drop chart
it's an
puberty
interesting time
is
for us all.
it's a terrible visual image.
So I liked that part of the platforming. I liked Stranger's movement. Stranger's movement, especially in run mode, I thought was organic. It made you feel powerful. It had a similar feel like Assassin's Creed running. Felt very natural, and you felt really powerful doing it. Another game...
If in Assassin's Creed, when you bumped into someone, you just immediately stopped and sent them flying with money coming out of them.
Or a game like Prototype, which also had huge mobility. Those are the games that I'm thinking of, and I'm like, wow, this game did it a little bit earlier than other games had for me.
The thing that I found was that when you're in a full sprint with Stranger, he runs on all fours, and all of a sudden he corners really, he moves very quickly. And I found him easier to control. I just would double jump constantly because you would maintain forward momentum. But air control was a lot more precise than running on the ground control.
There was a way you could mitigate that. If you used your camera turning as well, you turned sharper.
Oh, I didn't want to turn sharper. I wanted to turn less sharp than he would turn. So I would be constantly double jumping. So he would be in the air at all times.
What do you mean?
I could make...
Now, what's your complaint about his turning? You said it wasn't sharp.
It would be very sharp, and I would usually lose control, or sometimes I would make a much sharper turn than I expected, and I would run into someone, or I'd crash into a wall. Well, instead, I double jumped all the time.
All right.
What were you saying, Dan?
I was just about to come in and say completely the opposite thing, actually. I thought his turning circle when he was at full speed was really sluggish. But I love
the camera thing.
Yeah, same. But I did love the momentum of the platforming. It's very you're moving forward rather than up.
Yes.
And there's just a lovely feel to that momentum as you're playing, and I think that partly ties into Stranger's Run animation, which as you said is fantastic.
Yeah, and I think that to your point, there were a few times where I was. There was a treasure chest on a roof or something that you'd have to jump to. Basically, you'd get up to full sprint speed, jump onto a rock in the middle, and then jump onto the roof, or have to hit 2 or 3 jumps in a row. And at no point were you able to stop, because if you stopped, you lost momentum, and once you lost momentum, you couldn't make the jumps you needed to make. So by necessitating you to make those precise hops, it felt a lot more fluid than some other more measured platforming experiences, which I didn't anticipate early on just because his run animation only works when you're going downhill or neutral hill. If you're going uphill, he'll slow down to the point where he starts walking again, which is an odd design choice, but it's
natural.
fine. It's just different. Yeah. But I thought that since he was so sluggish most of the time, that it would be a lot more about double jumping and jumping from platform to platform, whereas this game was a lot more about sprinting and then making a big hop.
Yeah.
Subtlety in platforming.
Yeah, a game like some other platformers that we played was Psychonauts.
Until Dawn.
No. But Psychonauts was very vertical in its platforming. So was Thomas was Alone. Thomas Was Alone had some horizontal but it was 2 options, up and to the right, and so Anyway, I like the mobility of Stranger's Wrath. It had a little bit of hiccups, but I can't fault it too much because, it's 2005 when this originally came out, so they can't be perfect. We can't set our standards beyond their means.
Yeah, and it actually held up a lot better than I thought it would for a game that came out in 2009.
Well, we played the HD remastered version, and I thought it was gorgeous.
Yeah, like the ammo creatures.
Visually stunning.
Looked very, very, very nice. Chippunks, as they were talking shit, looked pretty good. Just consistently talking shit. Okay, so want to start moving towards the spoilery stuff?
Well, I think I had one other quick mechanical point, which was POV swapping. Let's just talk about that real quick, because I think I wanted to talk about 3 points: ammo types, which we covered earlier, mobility stuff, and then let's talk about POV. So, lots of games in this era had an option to go from first person to third person. In fact, most of them did, but none of them really did anything with it, right? Or very rarely did it come into play. Some games of this time period and a little bit before I'm thinking about is like Super Mario 64, right? You had a first-person mode, but it was basically just stand still, go into first-person mode, and you're just a camera turret. You can't really move, right?
Banjo-Kazooie, I think.
Banjo-Kazooie had a similar thing where you could actually like shoot eggs from from Kazooie while you're in first-person mode, but that was about it. Or maybe you'd have some type of transformation
item.
But binocular item where it's like a transformation effect where you like became a submarine or something and you were in first person mode now. A game like Legend of Zelda had first person shooting, but you were just a turret basically.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, you had games that were entirely first person with some third person options, and usually they didn't hold up very well. They were kind of chunky and bad. Stranger's Wrath did this beautifully. The first person point of view was necessary. The third person point of view was necessary. They made both point of views a requirement of the game. You had to be good at both of them. They made switching between the two very natural and fluid, and I guess it made you feel more like I'm having a hard time articulating this. It made you feel more like you were in this like natural perspective. I'm not really articulating this very well. I felt like I was Stranger.
You feel it was more immersive.
Yeah.
I definitely felt like whatever perspective I was choosing to use at the time was the right perspective to see, and the transition animation, like the toggle, was so smooth and so quick that I was frequently using it, whereas in other games where being first person is an option, I would just avoid that option. Especially because the camera controls were usually garbage. And in this game, they were not.
I had some camera issues.
Yeah, the biggest problem I had with the perspective switching was some of the bosses at the end of the game would put you into a stun state if you were in third person, but if you were in first person, you wouldn't get put into a stun state?
You were still in stun state. You were still in stun state, but it was harder to... Sorry, it was like it was harder to get out of stun state if you were in first person.
I found it harder when I was in third person, but there were some circumstances where what you see in first person versus third person are very different. Like in third person, you'd see yourself get knocked down, but then in first person, you still have your crossbow out and you could still aim and shoot.
You can't shoot if you're in that stun state.
But you could aim. You could
you could toggle your... Yeah, you could be looking around and stuff.
Yeah, so it led to this weird situation where if I toggled out to third person, he's on the ground, like on his face. But then if I go to first person, he's got his crossbow pointed straight ahead and he's perfectly fine. But those are weird edge cases.
Yeah.
With enemies that knock you down.
Something that they skipped, which is normally in games, is like a center the camera behind you button, and they didn't really have that. I think that would have helped a lot of things.
That is mapped in there.
Really?
It's on. Yeah, I played the PS3 version. It's mapped to L3.
For PS3?
Yeah.
For PC, I didn't need it that much, but I didn't find the button.
Maybe I didn't see it, but I also played it on the Steam port, so maybe I missed it. If it's there, then kudos, because it needs to be there, and I'm just an idiot for not pushing all the buttons to find it.
Push all the buttons, Billy. You get the achievement for pushing all the buttons.
Really?
Yeah, well, now you're never going to have 100% in this game.
No.
Push all the buttons. Sorry. And it locks you out if you don't do it in your first playthrough. So you'll never have it.
I mean, okay, well, we hit all the points that I wanted to talk about. Is there anything mechanically wise you want to just brush up on, or final thoughts mechanically, or intro story before we get into spoiler territory? And
I thought that the upgrades were cool. Some of them, I liked some of the hidden stuff in the environment. There wasn't very much of it.
There was some,
but it was there. There was a little bit. Like I found a hidden gold vein, like jewel vein, like a cave, and I found a black market dealer in New York City.
The black market dealer was cool. I found like a hidden statue or vase or something.
Yeah, you robbed the grubs.
Basically,
of their heritage.
Yeah,
same.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't that much moolah, all things considered. Their heritage wasn't worth very much.
No.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, and then there was, I think, there's the awful farm. You can rob that farmer of all of his money.
And apparently kill him for an achievement.
Yeah.
I wish I'd done that.
He doesn't like it when you rob him. I did rob him.
Get out of my house!
Just spot on impressions today, Billy. Very good.
You sure you don't have a future in voice acting?
I would love it, but please, Oddworld people, don't call me up to be your next chicken race representative.
We need another take. Say, can you get out of my house?
I won't do that. Maybe if you stick around for part 2 of the podcast, maybe I'll do another.
This is going to be our least listened to part 2. Let's do the podcast.
What a tease.
We'll talk about Final Fantasy VIII too, guys. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Oh, now it's going to be our most listened to part 2.
That sounds like more of a threat for part 2 than a tease.
Part 2, 4 hours long. We discuss Final Fantasy VIII and maybe get to All
right. Anything else, Pete, Dan?
I have nothing mechanically. No. I'm pumped about the story, though. I want to talk about it.
Yeah, the rest of the mechanical stuff that I want to say tie in so closely to the story that I can't say it without going into spoiler territory, so I'll hold off for part 2.
Yep. Okay, so that is part 1. All you want to know about living, ammo, and double jumps. So please join us in part 2 where we talk about the gigantic twist and how that changed my opinion of the game, and pretty much I think everyone's opinion of the game turned on that twist, pretty much.
Yeah.
So there's a teaser. Come on back. Okay, so we will be back in a bit. If you don't come back, that's fine. You can still leave comments and stuff on the site. So if you want to get at the podcast, go ahead at Deep Listens Pod on Twitter, deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com, or deeplistens.libsyn.com. We're on Stitcher now. We're on iTunes. Rate, review, whatever. All right. Thank you, Billy. Thank you, Pete.
Yep.
Thank you, Dan, for special guesting on this part 1. You'll stick around for part 2?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Till part 2. Thanks for listening. Peace.